I'm live. Yay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final installment of the Climate Book Club for this particular book. Don't worry, the Climate Book Club is not going away that easily. But this is the last time we're going to talk about the book, Don't Even Think About It, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change by George Marshall. If you haven't checked it out yet, then please do. Still highly recommend. And we will be going over some of the last points that are talked about in this book. And then we are going to move on to the next book, which is Climate Courage. How Tackling Climate Change Can Build Community, Transform the Economy, and Bridge the Political Divide in America by Andreas Karelis. Yes. So that'll be the next book that we're going to read. But let's dive into the final chapters of Don't Even Think About It. And we're going to kind of just summarize the chapters by using his summary of the book because one of the things I love about this book is that there's a lot of good, I was going to say analogies, but that's not the right word. Examples. There's a lot of good examples of and situations that George Marshall explains in the book of how he came to the conclusions he did. A lot of amazing storytelling. So I highly recommend it for that aspect. It's not super dry, like I feel like is assumed by a lot of environmental and climate change related books. It's not super depressing either, only semi-depressing. You know, we can't be completely non-depressing talking about climate change, but it's a pretty good read. It's very simple, very small chapters. So if you haven't checked it out, highly recommend you do. And it talks about, how to communicate with about climate change. I didn't introduce myself. Hi, my name is Becky, and welcome to the Beckisphere. And welcome back to my channel. I'm just messing this whole thing up today. Okay. If you're new here, hi, I'm Becky, and every Monday and Thursday, with some other videos sprinkled in occasionally, we talk about everything relating to the climate crisis. The problems, yes, but the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, click the like, share, comment, all that good stuff. I would really appreciate that. Because I have a lot of topics that I want to cover and I want to share them with the world because it's a very important topic to cover. Okay, anyways, enough of that. I have my nondescript beverage. I have my mother that doesn't want to be on camera, but she's here for moral support. Say hi, Mom.
Hi.
So if you hear a voice from beyond, it's my mother. I feel like I need to put a little tag or something like on the side, like Sandy. Just because people in part of the way through, they're just like, wait, now we're hearing this other voice. What's going on with that? Yeah. Anyways, okay. Enough of the jibber jabber. Let's get into it. So what we're going to talk about is one of the last chapters, actually, of the book. Yeah, we're kind of skipping around because Mom and I want to move on to the next book. And also, this book was written in 2014. So while it is a really good conversation point of how to discuss climate change, because that, to some extent, really hasn't changed that much, the variables in which So some of the facts that he talks about in this book, like the percentage of people that deny climate change, the percentage of people who ignore climate change, that kind of stuff, that's changed, to be honest. We have become a lot better at talking about climate change internationally. It unequivocally, yes. We still have a long ways to go, honestly, until it's discussed to the level in which it really needs to. But we have come a long way with it. So to some extent, there were some parts of this book that weren't as relevant because we're not living in the same world that we were living in 6 years ago.
And the fires have happened, and there's more hurricanes.
That's true. And there's a lot more obvious environmental disasters that can be pointed to climate change to make it worse. And I think there's also been a lot more documented science that has helped connect those disasters to climate change. So where there were points in which scientists really were not feeling comfortable saying unequivocally that climate change resulted in this disaster being a lot worse, now we can say that yes, it has, because we look at the simulations of what it would have been without a degree increase in warming of the oceans and versus not for things like hurricanes. And anyways, if you want to learn about HPC, which is high-powered computing, and how that attributes to us acting on climate change, then please comment below HPC and I will get you going on that. Okay, let's go back to it. So the reason why we wanted to move on from this book is because there's a bunch of 2020 books that we want to talk about. And while this is fairly relevant, I think that the 2020 books will be even more relevant. So yeah, anyways, now I will move on. Okay, so we're going to go on to chapter 42, which is called In a Nutshell, Some Personal and Highly Biased Ideas for Digging Our Way Out of This Hole. And so this chapter is kind of a summary of some of the main points that he really wanted to stress in this book. And to prove that he really wanted to stress it, there are a lot of bolded and capitalized parts of this chapter. So he is very clear on the parts that he wants to stick in the reader's brain. So we're going to go over some of those parts. You're welcome, George. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is we need to emphasize that climate change is happening here and now. It's not a future problem. It's not a problem for the children of the future to deal with. It is happening right now. And it's not something for just some other third world countries to deal with. Everybody has to deal with it. And that's something that I'm stressing very much in my YouTube channel. Is that it's happening here and now, focusing on what's going on now and how it is attributed to climate change. And sorry, another side note, but that's something that I'm going to keep comparing to what we're talking about is my plans for this YouTube channel and how it has impacted how I want to proceed working on this YouTube channel and framing it. So yes. Okay. So that's the first one. No one's really surprised that that is a big argument that needs to be made, is that climate change is happening here and now. And then on page 232, another part that we need to focus on when it comes to communicating climate change is that we need to open up the conversation for long-term preparedness. So he says, preparedness and adaptation are routes for people to accept that climate change is real and already underway. And as I've shown, it is possible to build a discussion around these topics even when it is politically taboo to talk about the wider issues. So for example, if we're talking about something having to do with the forest fires that are happening in California, we can potentially not talk about the actual climate change thing, but we still need to discuss that the wildfire season's getting worse and we need to find new ways to fight those fires or to prevent those fires from being as bad as they are. And one way of doing that is addressing climate change. So that's kind of how you also bridge into that conversation.
The military bases are also doing prevention.
Yes. Military bases, and we discussed this in a previous book club session, but military have already moved significantly on climate change impacts. So for those in certain political offices that are denying climate change, it's very hypocritical to then turn around and have military act on it. So the military is doing things such as increasing the height of certain bases to account for sea level rise and putting up seawalls and those kinds of things. So it's a problem that is being addressed behind the curtain, but we need to have it addressed completely.
And a lot of cities are preparing for sea level rise.
A lot of cities are preparing for sea level rise. So that is another part that needs to be discussed. So again, we have talking about how climate change is here and now. If you hear a sneeze, that's one of the dogs because all the pets decided they need to be in here now. And the second one, thank you for the like, whoever that was. The second one is that we need to open up the conversation about long-term preparedness. Oh, hi, Raquel. Nice to see you here. Great having you here. Yeah, so we were talking about climate change communication and what is important to focus on. And some of the other points that he talks about that climate change needs to be talked about in this context is talking about it from a positive standpoint. Instead of just talking about what we need to lose, we also need to talk about what we are going to gain. What is the benefit of acting on this? How are we going to actually have better lives as a result of acting on this? And I think this goes back to how a lot of different ideas on how to address climate change also address other systemic issues that we are currently facing, such as racial injustice issues, economic issues, infrastructure issues, developmental issues. So there's a lot, health issues. There's a lot of different other issues that people say issue. Take a shot. No. There's a lot of different issues, because I can't think of another word, that are in sync with climate change problems too. Yeah. And by the way, Raquel, feel free to chime in with any other thoughts and stuff. I will completely stop with what I'm saying and talk with the chat, because that's really what I want to do, is have a conversation. So stop me, please. And okay, so that is another main way to phrase it. And that is something that I want to do on this channel. I want to focus on the solutions. That's why I keep saying it in the beginning part of my videos, is that we focus on the problems, yes, but the solutions, yes, because we're not going to solve the issue by just becoming depressed. So that is another point that is covered. It's okay if you don't have the book. Honestly, a lot of the topics that are covered are pretty intuitive, I think. And so if there's any points that you just want to talk more about, or to brainstorm even different ways in which climate change can be framed, then that's fine too. So yeah, so that's another point. And another one that we also found interesting was that there's a wide range of solutions that can address this issue. And so one of the things that we need to do is we need to talk about all the different solutions out there, because I feel like also some solutions are a lot more talked about than others. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's more validity to those solutions than others to some extent. To some extent it does. But in other cases, I feel like it just depends on what has more money on it. So
give an example.
Okay, so an example is we talk about renewable energy a lot and different forms of renewable energy. And I think the energy sector does a relatively good job of talking about those alternatives and stuff. But an example of a topic that needs to be addressed for climate change that doesn't talk about a lot of solutions is agriculture. We don't really discuss those solutions as openly, but those are still big points of climate change that need to be addressed. So that's an example I can think of. And also, I feel like a lot of people are negating nuclear power. I'm going to get a lot of hate for that from environmentalists if anyone watches it. But nuclear power is another one that is being overlooked as a possible option. Yeah, from agriculture to transportation, exactly. There's a lot of different ways to solve the problem. And I think that once we open it up to the idea that there are a lot of solutions out there, and people feel more comfortable brainstorming, which is another thing I really want to do on this channel, is just brainstorm different solutions, then I think that we're going to get a lot more creative and a lot more well thought out solutions that go beyond just the generic ones that are usually talked about. So that is another aspect. And then Sorry, Dad just walked in and I got confused.
Oh.
Mom's going to go check out what Dad wants. Okay. So another aspect that George Marshall talks about in which climate change needs to be framed is talking too much about what enemies of climate change movement talk about. So like instead of constantly addressing your argument, don't put that much pressure on what climate change deniers say and how to justify your thoughts. Climate acceptance is the majority. So therefore, we need to move on from the conversation of constantly having to justify why we think that climate change is happening. And I think that's something I personally get stuck on a lot in the channel, like talking about how fossil fuel industries have covered up a lot of information about climate change. That sucks, and they should be held accountable for it. But, you know, besides them being held accountable for it, how does that help move us forward to different solutions? So that's another point that he brought up, is to focus more on your own points and where we're going from there, and not necessarily to just leave it at arguments that are being made by the other side.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Definitely.
Okay, good. You follow me? Okay, so that's another element that he also talks about in the book. Yeah, never accept your opponent's frames of things. Yeah. Another aspect, I guess I'm just going to keep listing them, is to be alert to your own biases. And that is a very important one. And I think that that also goes kind of with the idea of not looking at all the options for solutions, because everybody has their own biases on what they think would be best for the country, best for the world in order to act on this problem. But increased amount of encouragement towards conversation with different experts in the field, and recognizing that not all experts have all the answers, then that leads to more thinking about it. You know, the problem is not solved. The problem doesn't have just one side to it. The problem can't be solved just by some main block solutions. It might depend more state by state, it might depend more nation by nation, it might depend locally, but we need to come up with solutions that work for different areas. Yes, so that's another one. Another part that he came to talk about is that we should frame climate change from the perspective of journey of conviction. So he actually compared how in religious environments, how people are drawn to act from that sort of environment. And he says that learning from religions, we can present climate change as a journey of conviction, which will contain pure doubt and uncertainty, as well as moments of personal revelation and sudden awareness. Encourage people to explain in their own words these moments and the process by which they came to terms with the science, recognizing that conviction is sometimes hard to maintain and needs to be reaffirmed. And this goes on to his next point that he talks about, which is to be emotionally honest. Be upfront with where you are in the situation, what your understanding is, how you came to those conclusions. I think constantly reiterating to yourself how you came to those conclusions, making sure that your arguments are backed up, that's critical thinking in a nutshell. And we all need more of that. And this part encouraged me for Monday's video to talk about how I avoided talking about climate change until I think it was sophomore year of college. Even though I worked at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, I interned there for 4 years in high school, and they obviously talk about environmental issues, but I didn't talk about it. I mean, I guess I talked about it in the aquarium, but I didn't talk about it in my daily life. That was not going to be something I was going to focus on. Anyways, I'm not going to give you any more spoilers. Watch my video on Monday to learn about my own personal journey of conviction, I guess. Because, not everybody starts from the womb. Rahul says, wow, that's crazy, exciting topic. Yay, I'm glad you find it interesting. I do want to insert myself more into, I kind of want to be a personality in this. I want to be factual. I want to, deliver the science and the solutions and everything. But I think it can help to personalize those issues. And so I kind of want to be, I guess, a little bit of a personality on Facebook, if I can, that covers these topics, like how a lot of other people cover a lot of other topics. So that's my goal. And so Monday's video is kind of a start on that, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So the next part that we're talking about is, and this is definitely another video I want to do. Oh, Rahul says subject matter. Okay, I don't know where you're going. Subject matter. Yes. Okay, Raquel says, I find when it comes to people's beliefs about climate change, it is religiously unaffiliated, don't you think? Yes. So I'm not saying that it is a religion. I'm definitely not saying that. But I think that there is definitely some parallels that people draw towards becoming religious or finding their faith and also just discovering what is correct, I guess, for them, that goes along with the idea of coming to terms with something as big as climate change. Does that make sense?
Yeah. He was doing more of a parallel with religion. He wasn't saying it was that it was a particular religion. He was saying people feel so deeply about it.
Let me read the previous paragraph that also talks about its connection with religion too. So he says, and this is on page 236, right before the previous paragraph that I read. He said, we should be prepared to learn from religions and the thousands of years of experience they have in creating methods to sustain socially held belief. This does not mean that climate change is a religion any more than a declared belief in the right to personal freedom, sound finance, and the strength of the military are religions. These are statements of commitment to personally held ideals, taken as it happens from Republican presidents. Okay. So does that make sense? So it's not that climate change is a religion. I'm definitely not saying that.
Or promoted by any religion.
Definitely not saying that either. But the way that people are strong and hold on to their convictions and how they get to that point of understanding where they're at and believing so strongly in what is true, I think that is something that can be learned from, or that George thinks can be learned from through religion. I think this pertains to a previous chapter, and I will be perfectly honest, I had a really busy work week and I didn't finish all the last chapters, which is why we're going through the summary chapter. Sorry. I am going to read it over Thanksgiving break because I want to finish a book. When was the last time you finished a book? I haven't finished a book in a little while. It's bad. Anyways, so Raquel, let me know if that makes sense of how I clarified that. Because I do want to be clear on what I was trying to say with that, or what George was trying to say with that. I just thought that was a really interesting point. Rahul says, sure. Okay, well, I tried. Rahul says, Raquel says, I find many who identify with religious tradition are particularly likely to say the earth is warming due to human activity. Really? I'm surprised by that because, to be honest, I feel like a lot of Republicans are religious people. That's too big of a generalization. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying that.
No, because I'm religious, your mom, and I'm
true. And you trust that that this is a big problem.
Same with Grandma and Papa.
True, but I do know a lot of I don't know a lot of other people, I guess, but like evangelicals.
But it's different. It's different.
Maybe we really shouldn't have put the religion thing on this. Let's
Don't go there.
Just ignore me. Raquel says, I read an article in the New York Times talking about it. Can you send me that? Because I'm actually really interested. Sorry, don't mean to make it religious. No, I'm the one that started it. It's me. It's George. We're blaming George. We're blaming George. She laughed at that. Rahul says, as in, this is the last session of this book. Yes. This is the last section of this book. We're going to move on to climate courage afterwards. And he also says, I wonder how Buddhism see this. I need to learn about that. I feel like Buddhism is pretty based in nature, but I am going off of stereotypes that I've heard. So I really don't know. You should check. I need to check my biases, and I need to stop saying weird biases that I can't fess up to on the internet. Okay. Anyways, let's move on. So another part that he was saying, and this is something that I find especially interesting, and I think a lot of people are focusing on it right now, and Rahul says there's a lot of stories and Suta's set up in nature. So thank you for making me feel like I was kind of right on my assumptions. Anyways, okay. So one of the things that he talks about is that it's important to stress that climate change is not something that should just be an environmental issue. And I think that that is an extremely important part. And I think that could be a whole nother video that I talk on where I just kind of go off on it. But that is, I've noticed that from the very get-go of when I started becoming environmental and stuff, is that climate change gets put in the category of environmentalism, and anybody who doesn't want to be a tree hugger stays far away from the topic. If you don't have a shirt that has herbs on it, you just can't talk about it. And that's just not true, because climate change has to do with everything from economic stability to infrastructure to military to literally everything you would be interested in. And that's the case for everybody. Everybody can find a connection with it. And so it was really unfortunate that it happened to, or not happened to, but it's really unfortunate that it ended up getting framed in a way that only environmentalists can deal with it, because that's just not the way it is.
And there's a whole segment of the population that is not into green stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it totally throws them off and makes them just want to back away from it when it's piled in with all that other environmental stuff.
Exactly. As well as, while a lot of people who learn more about the topic, I feel like do naturally become more environmental, because how can you not when you hear about your carbon footprint and stuff? You can still live almost any kind of lifestyle and any kind of mentality. You can end up hiking every day of the week, or you can live in the middle of the city and have absolutely no plants in your apartment. It's not necessary for you to be an environmental person inherently for you to care about this issue. And that's one of the things that George is saying, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, because I feel like that is a big blocker to a lot of people that I've talked to about the issue. It's like, oh, I'm not a tree hugger. So, and I'm like, that doesn't make the world not heat up. So, it's something that we need to move it away from it just being an environmental issue. And just like that, we also need to move it away from it being a partisan issue, because that has gotten us into a whole heck of a lot of issues. That's not good. So that's not a surprise of a statement. Raquel says the collective will to address climate change. Exactly. It needs to be something that people just find as a human issue. Mm-hmm. Also, I think I personally frame it a lot as something that a lot of other species will have to deal with as well. We need to focus on it being a human-centric issue, because it is. The planet's going to be just fine. it's not going to look the same. There's not going to be necessarily the same species, but the planet itself, Gaia, will be fine. But humans might not live through this if we don't act. So it really is a human-centric issue, and we need to focus less on the polar bears and focus more on the Floridians that are currently, underwater. Louisianans and Floridians. Nicaraguans are suffering too. That kind of thing. So that is another point that he wants to stress in this book. This should start with affirming wider values, which it is well established experimentally make people far more willing to accept information that challenges their worldview. Yeah. So you kind of go from where people are at and what they care about. And that's how you dive into the climate change issue. And finally, the last one that I'm going to talk about from this book is kind of going with the being emotionally honest about your journey for it. Is also recognizing that this is a tough issue. It's hard. It's not fun to deal with. And that is another video that I want to do, because there has been studies that have looked at specifically climate change induced depression. Frankly, I'm definitely one of the people that has it. 100%. And that it's okay to feel anxious and grieve for the loss of certain parts of the planet that are not going to survive this change. And to recognize that it is unfortunately a depressing issue, because it just is. It's bad. But obviously we need to focus on the solutions. We need to focus on the good things. And we need to be more of the Pollyannas and the Cassandras. We need to be optimistic almost to a fault, because, if you don't, then it's just going to get you. So it just makes sense to try to be positive about it instead. Yeah. So those are some of the main parts that George Marshall wanted to stress in this book for how to address the climate change conversation. This is the point where I open it up to y'all. If there's any main aspects that I've talked about in this point, go ahead and address it now. And while you do, we're going to slowly give you a slideshow of all the pets that are in this room, starting with my cat that is in a cast. So this is Rue. Hi.
Cast.
And he's a purple cast. You baby. He's like, why did you pick me up? I was happily asleep. Yeah. So this is my child, Rue. He's also someone I want to make a video on because he had an interesting origin story. Spoiler alert, he was found in a bush. Yeah. But he's a good boy. So that's one of the animals that's in here.
I can't show you Charity. She's too big.
Well, that's when I'll move the camera, but I'll take Carly. I'm leaving this as an opportunity if anyone wants to talk about any other things with climate. It's not really. This is Carly. She's a Chihuahua Dachshund mix, also known as a Chiweenie.
She's like, what am I doing up here?
And she wants to get down. And then the final one that's snoring in the background is Charity, and she is a black lab. Raquel says, hi, Rue and Charlie. Yes, Carly, but it's close. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess with that, go ahead and keep the conversation going in the comments below after this video airs. And
no thing next.
Oh, yes, and that's important. There's not going to be a Climate Book Club thing on Thursday because obviously,
it's
Thanksgiving. So we're going to be thankful instead. But there will still be a video on Monday and the following Monday. So the work never stops. And with that is where I'm going to end this video. Thank you so much for coming. Special shout out to Raquel. I almost combined your names, Rahul and Raquel. And I will see you guys later in the Beckisphere. Bye.